The space station floated in the darkness between three solar systems. It was called Vega Station, and it was the largest thing ever built by living creatures. From far away, it looked like a silver ring spinning slowly in the empty void. Inside that ring, 1,000 different species walked, talked, and traded. Today, they had all come for one reason. The Galactic Peace Assembly was meeting. Stood near the tall windows and watched the stars. He was a human man of 32 years. His body was thick with muscle, and his eyes were calm like deep water. He wore the dark uniform of Earth's military, and on his belt hung a short blade in a black cover. The blade had been in his family for 4 generations. His grandfather had carried it in the old wars on Earth, now carried it among the stars. Behind him, Ambassador was preparing her notes. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a soft voice, but had seen her speak to presidents and generals. He had seen her make powerful men become quiet with just her words. She was not weak. She was simply a different kind of strong. "Are you worried?" asked without looking up. Turned from the window. "Number should I be?" The hegemony delegation arrived this morning. Commander is leading them personally. Knew that name. Everyone in the galaxy knew that name. Was the military commander of the hegemony, a group of alien species that had ruled this part of the galaxy for 10,000 years. He was tall, with gray skin and 4 arms. His people called him the Iron Voice. He had destroyed entire planets. He had ended civilizations. And he hated humans. "Then I will stay close to you," said simply. Smiled. It was a tired smile. The hegemony has been asking the assembly to limit human expansion. They say we breed too fast. They say we are too aggressive. They say Earth is a death world and its children are dangerous. "Earth is a death world," said. "That is not a lie." He thought about his home. He thought about the hurricanes that could flatten cities, the earthquakes that could swallow mountains, the diseases, the predators, the wars. Humans had survived all of it. They had climbed out of the mud and reached for the stars with bloody hands. No other species in the galaxy had done what they had done. Most intelligent life evolved on gentle worlds with calm weather and few dangers. They had never needed to become strong. Humans were different. "The other species are scared of us," said. "I cannot blame them. When they first met us, we were already fighting each other with nuclear weapons. They thought we would destroy ourselves. Instead, we spread across 100 worlds in 200 years. We are hard to kill," said. "Yes, and that is what frightens them." The door opened and a small alien creature walked in. It had blue skin and large black eyes. Its name was, and it was Sisistant. It belonged to a species called the Meek, which was a translation of what they called themselves. The Meek were small and fragile. A human child could break their bones with a simple touch. But they were kind and honest, and they had welcomed humanity into the galactic community when others would not. "Ambassador," said in its soft voice, "the assembly is ready for you." Stood and straightened her formal coat. "How is the mood?" "Tense. Many delegates are watching the hegemony with worry. Commander has been speaking privately with several representatives. He is building support for his proposal." "What proposal?" asked. Looked at him with its large eyes. "He wants the assembly to declare humans a Class 5 threat. It would allow the hegemony to take military action against human colonies." Felt his jaw tighten. A Class 5 threat was the most dangerous classification in the galaxy. It was reserved for species that could not be reasoned with, species that could only be contained or destroyed. "They want to cage us," he said quietly. "Or worse," replied. She walked toward the door and followed. "But we will not make it easy for them. Come, let us show the galaxy what humans truly are." The assembly hall was a massive dome at the center of Vega Station. Thousands of seats rose in circles around a central platform. Each seat held a delegate from a different world. Some were tall and thin, with skin like tree bark. Some were short and round, covered in soft fur. Some had wings. Some had tentacles. Some had no solid form at all and floated in special containers. and all of them turned to look when the humans entered. Felt their eyes on him. He heard the whispers spreading through the hall like wind through grass. That was what they called humans. It was not a compliment, it was a warning. Walked calmly to the human delegation seats. She nodded politely to the delegates she passed. Some nodded back. Many did not. Stayed one step behind her, his hand resting lightly on his belt. He was not expecting trouble, but he was always ready for it. The hegemony delegation sat on the opposite side of the hall. There were 20 of them, all wearing silver armor that gleamed under the lights. At their center sat Commander. He was larger than had expected. Even sitting, he towered over those around him. His gray skin was covered in old scars, and his 4 arms were folded across his broad chest. His eyes were yellow, with no visible pupils. They looked like the eyes of a predator. When those eyes found, they did not look away. Met the stare. He did not blink. He did not move. He simply looked back at the alien commander and let him see what lived behind a human's calm face. His upper lip curled slightly. It might have been a smile. It might have been something else. The assembly leader, a being of flowing light named Solus, rose from its platform. Delegates of the Galactic Assembly, we gather today to discuss matters of peace and security. Commander of the Hegemony has requested time to address the Assembly. Commander, you may speak. Stood, he moved with the slow confidence of someone who had never been challenged. His voice was deep and carried easily through the hall. Thank you, Assembly Leader. I come before you today with grave concerns. For 200 years, we have watched a new species spread across our galaxy. They came from a world of poison and violence. They survived things that would have killed any other people, and now they multiply like insects, claiming world after world. He paused and looked directly at the human delegation. I speak of the humans, the children of Earth. The hall was completely silent. I have studied them, continued. I have watched their history. They are a species born in blood. They fight constantly. They kill their own kind in numbers we cannot imagine. And now they are here among us pretending to be peaceful. His expression did not change, but saw her hands tighten slightly on the arms of her chair. I propose, said, that the Assembly declare humanity a Class 5 threat, for the safety of all species, for the future of our galaxy. A wave of murmuring spread through the hall, watched the delegates. Some were nodding, some looked uncertain, some looked directly at the humans with fear in their eyes. Rose to her feet. The Assembly recognizes Ambassador of Earth, Solus announced. Walked to the central platform. She stood there alone, a small human woman surrounded by thousands of alien eyes, and she began to speak. Watched her with quiet pride. She spoke of Earth's history. She spoke of the wars, yes, but also of the peace that followed. She spoke of human art and music and love. She spoke of how humans had learned from their mistakes and grown stronger because of them. She was magnificent. But across the hall, Commander was not listening. He was watching, and in his yellow eyes something dark was growing. Saw it, he recognized it. It was the look of someone about to do something terrible. Continued to speak, and her words filled the great hall like soft rain. She talked about the human colonies that had been built in the last 100 years. She described the cities they had raised on barren moons, the farms they had grown on frozen worlds, the children that played in streets under alien suns. She painted a picture of a species that had learned to hope. We are not monsters, she said, her voice steady and clear. We are survivors. Yes, we come from a hard world. Yes, we have known war, but we have also known peace. We have learned that building is better than destroying. We ask only for the chance to prove ourselves. Many delegates were nodding now. Even some who had looked fearful before were beginning to soften. His words were working. She was reaching them. But Commander had heard enough. He stood up suddenly, and the sound of his heavy boots hitting the floor echoed through the silent hall. His 4 arms were stiff at his sides, and his yellow eyes burned with cold anger. "Pretty words," he said, his voice cut through the air like a blade. "Pretty lies from a pretty mouth." "Stop speaking." She turned to face him calmly. "Commander, you will have your chance to respond when I have finished." "I have heard enough of your response," growled. He began walking toward the central platform. His guards moved to follow him, but he waved them back. "You speak of peace. You speak of hope, but I know what your kind truly is." The assembly leader flickered with concern. "Commander, this is highly irregular. Please return to your seat and wait for the proper." "Silence," snapped. The assembly leader's light dimmed but said nothing more. No one challenged the commander of the hegemony. No one had the power to. Climbed the steps to the central platform. He stood before, towering over her small frame. She barely reached his chest, but she did not step back. She did not look away. Rose from his seat. "Stay," said quietly without turning her head. It was not a request. It was an order. Stopped, every muscle in his body screamed at him to move forward, to put himself between and the threat. But he had sworn to follow her commands. He forced himself to stand still and watch. Looked down at with disgust clear on his face. "You think you can fool us. You think your soft words will make us forget what you are." "I think," replied calmly, "that you are afraid." The hall gasped. No one spoke to Commander that way. No one dared. His eyes narrowed. "Afraid of you, of your tiny, fragile species." "Yes," said. "You are afraid because you see what we could become. You have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years, Commander. You have never faced a challenge to your power, and now humans are here. We build faster than you. We learn faster than you. We adapt faster than you. In 200 years we have done what took your ancestors 2,000, and that terrifies you." Was very still. The air around him seemed to grow heavy, like the moment before a storm. "You should choose your next words carefully, human," he said. His voice was barely above a whisper, but everyone in the hall heard it. Lifted her chin. "I have chosen them already. You came here today not to protect the galaxy, but to protect your own power. You want to destroy humanity because you know that one day we might surpass you. That is not leadership, Commander. That is cowardice." The word hung in the air like a dropped knife. For 3 heartbeats nothing happened, then moved. His hand came up in a blur of gray skin and hard muscle. It struck across the face with a sound like cracking wood. The force of the blow lifted her off her feet and threw her to the ground. The hall erupted in chaos. Delegates screamed and shouted. Some fled toward the exits. Others stood frozen in shock. The hegemony guards rushed forward, hands on their weapons. On the other side of the hall, the human delegation rose as one, their faces dark with fury. But none of them were as fast as. He was already moving before hit the ground. The world around him seemed to slow down, the way it always did when danger came. He had felt this before, in the wars on distant moons, in the battles that had made him what he was. His body knew what to do. His mind simply followed. The small blue assistant was screaming something but did not hear it. He saw only the platform. He saw only standing over his fallen body. He saw only the enemy. He pushed through the crowd like water through sand. Delegates stumbled out of his way, some thrown aside by the force of his movement. He did not slow down. He did not hesitate. 3 seconds had passed. Looked up and saw him coming. The alien commander's eyes widened slightly. He had seen humans before. He had studied them. But he had never seen one move like this. He had never seen the true speed of a creature born on a death world. On Earth, humans had survived by being fast. Not as fast as the tigers that hunted them, but fast enough to escape. Fast enough to strike first. Fast enough to kill before being killed. 10,000 generations of survival had written that speed into their blood and bone. Raised his 4 arms to defend himself. His guards tried to reach him, but they were too slow. Everything was too slow now except for 4 seconds. reached the steps of the platform. He did not climb them. He leaped. His body rose through the air like something thrown from a catapult. His hand found the handle of the blade at his belt, the blade his grandfather had carried, the blade that had tasted blood in 100 battles. He drew it as he flew. The blade was not long. It was a simple weapon made of Korean steel, folded and hammered by hands that were now dust. It had no fancy technology, no energy field, no advanced materials. It was just metal, shaped by fire and skill into something deadly. In his hand it was enough. Tried to grab him. 4 arms reached out with crushing strength, but twisted in the air, his body bending in ways that should have been impossible. He slipped through those grasping hands like smoke through fingers. He landed behind the commander. 5 seconds. For one frozen moment, nothing seemed to move. Stood still on the platform. Stood behind him, the blade extended in a perfect line. Every eye in the hall was locked on them. Then's head fell. It separated from his neck and dropped to the floor with a heavy thud. It rolled twice and stopped, those yellow eyes still open, still filled with surprise. The massive body stood for another heartbeat, blood spraying from the stump of its neck, before it crashed down beside its head. The hall was completely silent. Straightened slowly. He held his blade at his side, red drops falling from its edge. His face was calm. His breathing was steady. He looked down at. She was pushing herself up from the floor. Her cheek was red and swelling where had struck her, but her eyes were clear. She looked at the body of the alien commander, then at the thousands of delegates staring at them in frozen horror. The broadcast feeds were still running. Every screen in the galaxy was showing this moment. Billions of beings were watching. Rose to her feet. She wiped blood from her lip and looked out at the assembly. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but it carried through the deathly silence of the hall. You just saw what happens when you touch one of ours. No one responded. No one could. The hegemony guards stood frozen, their weapons half raised, their eyes fixed on the human who had just killed their commander in 5 seconds. They did not attack. They did not move. They were trained warriors, veterans of 100 campaigns, and they were afraid. Understood their fear. He had seen it before, in the eyes of every enemy he had ever faced. It was the fear of the prey when it finally understood that it was being hunted. He flicked the blood from his blade and slid it back into its cover. Then he walked to his side and offered her his hand. She took it and stood fully. Her fingers were steady. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Always," he replied. Together, they looked out at the galaxy that was watching them. And the galaxy looked back, finally understanding what it truly was. The silence in the assembly hall lasted for 37 seconds. Later, historians would measure it exactly. 37 seconds of perfect stillness while the body of Commander cooled on the polished floor. Then everything happened at once. The hegemony guards finally moved, raising their weapons and pointing them at. They screamed orders in their harsh language, demanding he surrender. But their hands were shaking. Their voices cracked. They had just watched their commander, the most feared warrior in the galaxy, killed by a single human in less time than it took to blink. The human delegation pushed forward, forming a wall in front of it. There were 12 of them, men and women from Earth's colonies. None of them were soldiers-like, but all of them were humans. All of them had grown up on Deathworlds. All of them were ready to fight. Throughout the hall, other delegates scrambled for safety. The meek were crying, their small bodies shaking with terror. The tree-like beings from the outer rim stood frozen, their bark-covered faces unable to show expression, but their fear obvious in the way they leaned away. The gas-form creatures in their containers bubbled and churned with distress. And above it all, the broadcast feeds continued to record, continued to send images across the galaxy. In the capital city of the hegemony, millions watched their screens in shock. They saw their commander's head lying on the floor. They saw the human standing over him, blade in hand, face calm as still water. For the first time in 10,000 years, they felt something they had almost forgotten. They felt afraid. On human colonies across 100 worlds, the reactions were different. In the mining stations of Alpha 7, workers stopped their drills and gathered around. In the farming domes of New Sol, families held each other and watched in tense silence. In the shipyards of Station, engineers put down their tools and stared. A human had just killed the most powerful military commander in the galaxy. A human had moved faster than anyone thought possible. A human had defended his people. Pride spread through the human worlds like fire through dry grass. Back in the assembly hall, the assembly leader finally recovered enough to speak. Its form of flowing light expanded and contracted rapidly, a sign of extreme stress. Please, everyone, please remain calm. The guards will handle this situation. Ambassador, Sergeant, you must surrender yourselves immediately. Looked at the assembly leader with cold eyes. Surrender? For what crime? Your guard just killed Commander. My guard defended me after Commander assaulted me, replied. Her voice was steady and clear, filling the hall. Under Galactic Law, Section 47, any delegate who is physically attacked during an assembly session has the right to immediate defense by their security detail. Section 48 states that such defense may use any force necessary to stop the threat. The assembly leader flickered, but he killed him. Commander was twice Sergeant's size and had 4 arms. He was a known warrior who had killed thousands in combat. What force would you suggest was appropriate? Silence. The assembly leader had no answer. The small blue meek had managed to reach side. It was trembling badly, but it spoke up in its soft voice. The ambassador is correct. I have studied galactic law extensively. She is within her rights. The attack was broadcast to the entire galaxy. Everyone saw Commander strike her without provocation. A new voice entered the discussion. It was Grand Elder Sola of the Meek, a being so old that its blue skin had faded to gray. It rose slowly from its seat, supported by 2 younger members of its species. I move that this assembly officially recognize the human delegation's right to defend their ambassador, Sola said. Its voice was weak but carried the weight of centuries. Furthermore, I move that this assembly condemn the actions of Commander as a violation of peace protocols. Murmuring spread through the hall. The hegemony guards looked at each other uncertainly. Without their commander, they had no clear leadership. Without clear leadership, they did not know what to do. A delegate from the crystal beings of the inner rim rose next. I second the motion of Grand Elder Sola. Then another voice, and another. Species that had been silent for years spoke up. Species that had lived in fear of the hegemony for generations found their courage. One by one, they added their support. The assembly leader's light brightened slightly. The motion carries. This assembly formally recognizes the human delegation's right to defend their ambassador. The actions of Sergeant are ruled as legal under galactic law. The hegemony guards lowered their weapons slowly. They had lost. Their commander was dead, and the galaxy had chosen to side with the humans. There was nothing they could do. But their eyes promised revenge. Watch them carefully. He knew this was not over. The hegemony was vast and powerful. They controlled hundreds of worlds and billions of soldiers. The death of one commander, even their highest commander, would not break them. It would only make them angry. What happens now? Asked quietly. Placed a gentle hand on the small creature's head. Now we prepare for what comes next. On the human colony world of New, a young girl named watched the broadcast with her family. She was 8 years old, with bright eyes and a curious mind. She had been born on this world under an orange sun and had never seen Earth. But she knew the stories. Every human child knew the stories. She knew about the ice ages that had nearly frozen humanity to death. She knew about the plagues that had killed millions. She knew about the predators and the storms and the earthquakes. She knew how her ancestors had survived all of it through strength and stubbornness and the refusal to die. And now she watched a human soldier stand alone in a hall full of aliens, blood on his blade, protecting his people. "Mama," she said, "is that man a hero?" Her mother held her close. "Yes, my love, that is exactly what he is." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Human children asked their parents about the man on the screen. Human workers stopped their labor and felt pride swelling in their chests. Human soldiers watched and nodded, recognizing one of their own. But it was not only humans who were changed by what they saw. On a small moon in hegemony space, a young alien named Cora watched the broadcast alone in his tiny room. Cora was what the hegemony called a servant species. His people had been conquered long ago and now existed only to serve their masters. They cleaned the floors. They cooked the food. They did all the work that the hegemony considered beneath them. Cora had never seen anyone stand up to the hegemony. He had never imagined it was possible. His people had learned to bow their heads and accept their fate. Resistance meant death. Courage meant suffering. But now he had seen something different. He had seen a human, a single human, strike down the most powerful being Cora had ever known. He had seen that the hegemony was not unbeatable. He had seen that tyrants could fall. For the first time in his life, Cora felt something new stirring in his heart. He felt hope. Similar feelings spread through the servant species throughout hegemony space. In kitchens and factories and mining pits, beings who had given up on freedom began to remember what it felt like to dream. The image of Commander's head rolling across the floor became a symbol. It spread through whispered conversations and secret messages. The humans had shown them something important. The hegemony could bleed. The hegemony could die. Back on Vega Station, the assembly had descended into chaos. Delegates argued and shouted. Accusations flew back and forth. The hegemony representatives demanded justice. The human supporters demanded recognition. Everyone demanded something. Through it all stood calm and still. She had achieved something remarkable, not with weapons but with words and law. She had turned an assassination into a legal act. She had made the galaxy choose sides. Stood beside her, silent and watchful. His blade was clean now, wiped on the cloth he always carried. But his eyes never stopped moving, never stopped scanning for threats. "You planned this," he said quietly, so only she could hear. Did not look at him. "I planned to speak. I planned to argue. I did not plan for to attack me." "But you knew he might." A small smile touched her lips. "I knew he was proud. I knew he was angry. I knew that proud, angry beings sometimes do foolish things. And you trusted me to be fast enough." Now she did look at him. Her eyes were warm despite everything that had happened. "I have always trusted you, from the day we met." He remembered that day. A small colony on a dangerous moon, pirates attacking, fire and screaming and death. He had been young then, barely more than a boy, but he had fought with everything he had. And when the battle was over, a woman had found him sitting among the bodies, too tired to move. That woman was. She had seen something in him that day, something worth saving. She had taken him under her protection, sent him to the best military schools, shaped him into the warrior he had become. Everything he was, he owed to her. "I will always protect you," he said. "I know," she replied. "That is why we will survive what comes next." The broadcast feeds were still running, still sending images across the galaxy. The death of Commander had been seen by trillions. It could not be hidden, could not be forgotten. The galaxy had changed in 5 seconds. And nothing would ever be the same. 3 days passed after the death of Commander. 3 days of chaos and confusion and fear. The hegemony delegation had fled Vega Station, taking their commander's body with them. They promised vengeance. They promised war. They promised that humanity would burn. But they did not attack, not yet. In the capital of the hegemony, the Council of Lords met in emergency session. 12 beings sat around a massive table carved from the bones of a space whale. They were the rulers of the hegemony, the most powerful individuals in their civilization. And they were fighting. "We must strike immediately," Lord shouted, slamming his 4 fists on the table. "The humans killed in front of the entire galaxy. If we do not respond, we will look weak. And if we respond poorly, we will look foolish," Lord replied coldly. She was older than and calmer. "We saw the recordings. The human moved faster than our eyes could follow. Our best warriors would have trouble matching that speed." "One human," spat. "One lucky human with one lucky strike, it means nothing." "It means everything," said Lord, the oldest member of the council. His gray skin was covered in age spots and his 4 arms trembled slightly, but his mind was still sharp. "The humans did not just kill, they killed him legally. The Assembly ruled it a valid defense. If we attack them now, we become the aggressors. We become the villains." "The Assembly is nothing," shouted. "They have no army, they have no power, only we have power." "The Assembly has unity," said. 37 species voted to support the humans after the killing. 37 species who were afraid to oppose us for 10,000 years suddenly found their courage. Why do you think that is?" Had no answer. Lord leaned forward. "Because they saw what we saw. They saw that we can be beaten. Not by armies, not by fleets, but by a single being with enough speed and courage. The humans have given them hope. That is far more dangerous than any weapon." The council argued for hours more, but in the end, they reached no decision. The hegemony was paralyzed by uncertainty. For the first time in their long history, they did not know what to do. While the hegemony debated, the human worlds prepared. On Earth, the old home world, the United Human Council met in the ancient city of New Geneva. Representatives from every colony gathered to discuss the crisis. They knew war was coming. The only question was when. Admiral Jin stood before the council, a tall woman with silver hair and a face marked by decades of military service. She had commanded fleets in the Outer Rim campaigns. She had won battles that others said were impossible. Now she faced the greatest challenge of her life. "We cannot match the hegemony in numbers," she said, pointing at a holographic map of the galaxy. "They have 10,000 warships. We have 800. They have billions of soldiers. We have millions. In a direct conflict, they would crush us." "Then what do you suggest?" asked Counselor Park, an elderly man from the Mars colonies. "Surrender." "Never," Admiral Jin replied. "I suggest we use our advantages: speed, adaptability, unpredictability. The hegemony has fought wars for 10,000 years, but they have always fought the same way. Massive fleets, overwhelming force, direct attacks. They do not know how to fight any other way." "And we do." Admiral Jin smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "On Earth, we have a word for the kind of war I am proposing. We call it guerrilla warfare. Small groups, quick strikes, constant movement. We hit them where they are weak and disappear before they can respond. We make them afraid to sleep, afraid to eat, afraid to breathe." "Can it work?" another counselor asked. "It has worked before. On Earth, small groups defeated empires using these tactics. The hegemony is larger than any empire in human history, but they are also slower, more rigid, more predictable. Yes, I believe it can work." The council voted to prepare for war. Across the human worlds, factories increased production. Soldiers began training. Civilians learned to fight. Humanity was getting ready. On Vega Station and remained under the protection of the Assembly. Their quarters had been expanded, and additional human guards had arrived from the nearest colony. But they both knew that protection was an illusion. If the hegemony truly wanted them dead, the Assembly could not stop them. Spent her days in meetings with delegates from other species. Many wanted to align with humanity now. They saw which way the wind was blowing. The old order was dying, and they wanted to be on the winning side. Others were not so sure. "You have brought war to our door," complained Ambassador of the Stone People, a species that lived on high-gravity worlds similar to Earth. "The hegemony will destroy everything when they attack. Your colonies, yes, but ours as well." "The hegemony would have attacked eventually regardless," replied calmly. Commander was already preparing to declare humans a threat. His proposal would have passed. The only question was whether we would face them as victims or as fighters. "And now we face them as fighters, and we will not be alone," leaned forward. "Your people are strong, Ambassador. You evolved on a world with gravity twice Earth's standard. Your bones are dense as metal. Your muscles can lift 10 times what ours can. You are death like us." Stone Face showed no expression, but his voice was thoughtful. "You want us to join your war. I want you to join our survival. The hegemony has kept species like ours weak and divided for thousands of years. Separately, we are prey. Together, we are something else entirely." "What would we be together?" smiled predators. The Stone People joined the human alliance that night. Other death followed over the next weeks. The high swimmers of the ocean worlds, whose bodies could withstand crushing pressures. The night stalkers of the dark planets, whose eyes could see in absolute blackness. The fire born of the volcanic moons, whose skin could endure temperatures that would melt steel. The galaxy had many death worlds, and now their children were uniting. Watched these developments with growing concern. He was a soldier, not a politician. He understood killing, not diplomacy, but he could see that was building something larger than he had imagined. "You planned for this," he said one evening as they sat in their quarters watching the stars. "Not just the incident with all of it, the alliance, the war, everything." Was quiet for a moment. "Do you remember what Earth was like before we reached the stars?" "I know the history, wars, pollution, division." "Yes, we were killing ourselves slowly. We had grown so powerful that we could destroy our own world but not wise enough to stop ourselves." She turned to look at him. "When we found the galaxy, we found something we had always needed, an enemy large enough to unite us, a challenge great enough to make us stop fighting each other and start fighting together. The hegemony. The hegemony. They were the best thing that ever happened to humanity. They gave us a reason to become more than we were. Considered this, and now you are using that to unite other species as well." "Every death world has one thing in common," said. "Survival is difficult, resources are scarce, competition is fierce. This creates beings who are strong, fast, clever, and ruthless, beings like us. The hegemony knows this. That is why they have kept death separated and weak. They fear what we could become if we work together. And now they will face that fear." Yes, eyes were hard as diamonds. Now they will face everything they have been afraid of, and they will learn that their fear was justified. Far away in the depths of hegemony space, the servant species continued to whisper. The story of death spread through their hidden networks. They shared it in stolen moments, repeated it like a prayer, held it close to their hearts. Cora, the young servant who had watched the broadcast alone, had become something new. He was organizing, gathering others like him, teaching them that resistance was possible. He did not know that millions of others were doing the same thing on thousands of other worlds. He did not know that the hegemony was rotting from within, that its foundations were cracking, that its empire was about to face threats from every direction. He only knew that he was no longer afraid. And in a galaxy of 10 trillion beings, that single change of heart was the beginning of everything. The war was coming. Everyone could feel it. In the halls of power, in the streets of distant colonies, in the hearts of servants and soldiers alike, the old order was ending. Something new was being born. And humanity stood at the center of it all, exactly where they had always believed they belonged. The war lasted 5 years. History would remember it as the uprising, though it was much more than a simple uprising. It was the breaking of chains that had held the galaxy for 10,000 years. It was the fall of tyrants and the rise of new powers. It was fire and blood and death on a scale that made all previous wars seem small. And in the end, humanity won. Not alone, of course. The alliance that had built grew larger every month. The Stone People fought in the ground campaigns, their massive bodies crushing hegemony fortifications like paper. The Night Stalkers served as infiltrators, slipping through enemy defenses in the darkness. The Fireborn attacked hegemony shipyards, walking through flames that killed everything else. And the servant species rose. Korra led the first rebellion on a moon called Gray Harbor. He and 3,000 others attacked the hegemony garrison with stolen weapons and desperate courage. They should have died. The garrison had 10 times their numbers and 100 times their firepower. But Korra had learned something from watching that broadcast 5 years ago. He had learned that tyrants could fall. He had learned that the powerful could bleed. He had learned that a single act of courage could change everything. The rebellion at Gray Harbor succeeded, and it sparked 100 more across hegemony space. The Council of Lords tried to respond. They sent fleets to crush the rebellions. They executed servants by the thousands. They burned colonies and sterilized worlds. But every act of cruelty only created more enemies. Every death only fed the flames. Admiral Jin commanded the human fleets with cold precision. She never fought battles she could not win. She struck at supply lines and fuel depots and communication centers. She made the hegemony blind and hungry and afraid. She proved that a smaller force, properly led, could defeat a larger one. Served under her command for 3 years. He led assault teams against hegemony ships, his blade cutting through enemy soldiers like wind through grass. His name became legend among human troops. They called him the 5-second death, after the time it had taken him to kill Commander. He never spoke of that day. He carried no pride for what he had done. He had killed to protect, that was all. But he accepted the legend because it was useful. Enemy soldiers feared him. They surrendered rather than face him. His reputation saved more lives than his blade took. Remained the heart of the alliance. She traveled between worlds, speaking to leaders and common people alike. She reminded them why they were fighting. She kept them united when disagreements threatened to tear them apart. She was not a soldier, but she was the most important weapon humanity had. In the 4th year of the war, the hegemony made their final mistake. Lord, who had always favored aggression, convinced the Council to launch a massive attack on Earth itself. 1,200 warships, carrying 1,000,000 soldiers, crossed hegemony space in secret. They planned to destroy the human home world and break the spirit of the Alliance. They did not know that Admiral Jin was waiting for them. The Battle of Earth lasted 3 days. It was the largest space battle in galactic history. Human ships danced between hegemony formations, faster and more agile than their enemies. Stone People boarding teams cut through enemy hulls. Night Stalker saboteurs destroyed hegemony engines from within. On the 2nd day, the servant crews of 40 hegemony ships turned against their masters. They killed their officers and surrendered to human forces. It was the largest mutiny the hegemony had ever suffered. On the 3rd day, Lord was captured alive. Admiral Jin personally delivered him to the Assembly, where he was tried for crimes against sentient beings. The trial was broadcast across the galaxy, just as death had been. He was found guilty and executed. His head was removed by a human blade, a deliberate echo of what had done 5 years before. The message was clear. The age of the hegemony was over. The remaining lords surrendered 3 months later. Their empire, which had stood for 10,000 years, collapsed in a single year. The species they had enslaved were freed. The territories they had controlled were divided among the alliance members. The name hegemony became a curse, spoken only with disgust. A new order was born. The Galactic Union replaced the old assembly, with representatives from every species, including the former servants. Humanity was given a permanent seat on the ruling council in recognition of their role in the war. Served as the first human representative, she worked to build a galaxy where no species could dominate others, where strength was used to protect rather than oppress, where the lessons of the war would not be forgotten. Remained at her side, though he no longer carried his blade openly. He was tired of killing. He had done it for so long that he had almost forgotten how to do anything else. But under his guidance, he learned new skills. He helped train security forces for the Union. He taught young soldiers how to fight without losing their souls. He never married. He never had children. But he became something like a father to generations of human warriors who came after him. They learned his techniques and his philosophy. They learned that strength must be matched by wisdom. They learned that the fastest hand means nothing without a good heart. On the anniversary of his death, returned to the assembly hall on Vega Station. The bloodstains had been cleaned long ago, but he could still see exactly where the body had fallen. He stood there in silence for a long time. Found him there, as she often did on this day. "Do you regret it?" she asked. He thought about the question. 5 years of war had followed that 5 seconds of action. Millions had died. Civilizations had fallen. The galaxy had been transformed. "No," he said finally, "I would do it again." Even knowing what would follow. Especially knowing that. He turned to look at her. She was older now, her hair showing gray, her face lined with years of difficult work. But her eyes were still sharp, still warm. "He would have destroyed us if I had not stopped him. Maybe not that day, but eventually. What followed was terrible, but what would have happened without it would have been worse." Nodded slowly. "History agrees with you. Scholars say the hegemony was already dying when fell. Their empire was too large, too rigid, too cruel to survive. The war only accelerated what was already happening. Then we were right." "We were right." She smiled, that same tired smile he remembered from so many years ago. "Come, there is a ceremony to attend. The Union wants to honor you again." Groaned, he hated ceremonies. "Must I?" "You are a hero of the galaxy. Heroes must suffer through ceremonies. It is the price of glory." "There is no glory in what I did." "I know, but they need to believe there is. They need heroes to look up to, stories to inspire them. You are part of that now, whether you like it or not." He followed her out of the hall, past the spot where he had stood with a bloody blade, past the platform where had fallen. He followed her into the bright future that they had built together. Behind them, the stars continued to burn, indifferent to the small beings who lived beneath them. Empires rose and fell. Species were born and died. The universe went on as it always had. But in one small corner of one small galaxy, something had changed. The children of a death world had risen from their cradles of mud and blood and fire. They had reached for the stars and found them wanting. They had remade the galaxy in their image. And they had learned the most important lesson of all. Never touch what belongs to. The galaxy learned it too. They would never forget.